I'm Shira Bergbauer, and you're listening to an excerpt from the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast.
Right. So one thing I would look to see is if bedtime is at the appropriate time, because a lot of the times, like we were talking about, that the bedtime battles can happen if they're overtired. And so, just like you and I, if we're tired, don't ask me to like learn something new or to, do something on my own. It's just not going to happen, right? You're not in the right mindset. Same thing goes for our little ones. If they're struggling, the first thing I would recommend is, bringing bedtime back significantly earlier for temporary, right? We don't want to stay in a really early bedtime forever, especially that it's summertime. But that's the first step, is to see if the bedtime battles can stop and the night wakings can stop if we bring bedtime back a lot earlier. And I would say, I probably 90% of the time, that's usually the first fix, right? And parents are like, "What? An early bedtime and all this went away?" Yeah, that can be like one of the best things to do. So if that's not working, then we would recommend, going through some behavioral things. If there's boundaries in place, what happens if they're still struggling. There's some approaches that we can take. One of them is silent return, which is hard because you have a little one, right? They have their own little personalities. Really, is it silent? Has to be, right, for it to work. So silent return, which is every time they get out of bed, you bring them back silently, and it keeps going. And they can get out of bed 50, 60 times. But the thing with the silent return is that they're looking for engagement. And if you give them engagement, they're going to keep getting up, right? Whether it be positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement, they're going to be like, I got mommy to say hi. I got mommy to tuck me back in again. I got mommy or daddy to give me a kiss. So I'm going to keep doing it. But when the audience is not there, like parents, caregivers are not there, they're not engaging, that show stops. And so they're like, oh, this isn't fun to like give up anymore because mommy and daddy are not talking. They're not tucking me in anymore. Like, okay, I don't really want to get out of bed anymore. So that's what we're really getting at with the silent return, that the engagement is, there's absolutely zero engagement. And that's a little bit harder to kind of, coach parents through, because a lot of the time they're not aware that that one tuck, that one kiss, that one word can keep that engagement going. And so they're like, but I only said goodnight. You said goodnight. She's
So,
gonna wake up again and say, "Oh, good night,"
I'm
right? So,
playing this out in my head. You have a crying toddler who comes to your room at night,
yes,
and you just hold their hand and walk them back to their room and don't say a word. Is that how that looks like?
that's exactly how that looks like. And sometimes, depending
Wow.
on the child, I don't even actually recommend like holding their hand, because again, it's a form of engagement. So they're like, oh, well, mommy's going to hold my hand and walk me back. So I'm just going to keep getting up. Right. So, when they're at that age, having like a family meeting as well is really important. So they understand, just like we were talking about, they understand the importance of sleep, but, they have to be old enough to have that family meeting so they can really take that ownership of their sleep. So, if they're like 2.5 or 3, my recommendation would be still be in a crib anyways, right? Because they don't have that developmental capacity to understand like the consequences and what happens and the boundaries and the safety that really needs to be looked at. Because you certainly don't want like a 2-year-old wandering around the house. They may not even go get you, right? And I had a family that I worked with, and this little guy, he would go downstairs and he'd make himself something to eat.
Oh, wow.
Parents didn't even know, right? And so you don't know what happens, right? So
Yeah.
this, I'm a big safety person. I always want to make sure that they're safe. And parents are like, well, they're old enough. Are they? You want to be sure that they're old enough, right?
Yeah.
Because taking it away too soon actually takes their safety and security away from them. And you didn't even realize that just having their own little space is what they want. They want to be in that little space. They need that little space to feel comfortable and to feel safe. So I always recommend 3 and over for transitioning. So, I've worked with many families that have transitioned quite early, and it's a real struggle because they don't have that understanding yet. Well, you have to stay in bed, like you're telling them, but they're like,
Yeah.
okay, whatever. They
It's
just keep
open.
going,
It's
right?
really
So
open. And
that's
I
it.
think
They don't understand,
I think
right?
for us, we were like, "Oh, it's a safety thing. She's trying to climb out of the bed," but she really wasn't trying
Yes.
to climb out of the bed. But in our minds, we were like, "She's gonna try." She's
Yeah.
really short, and so I think we were like projecting this anxiety of her climbing out of the bed, and we created a situation that actually was riskier because
Yeah.
now
Okay.
she's like, "I need to get out of the bed, and I'm out, and now somebody opened the door, let me out."
Yes, right. But you have that safety that she's not, wandering through the house. So we've had to implement like gates on the top of the stairs, gates at the doorway, so many things. But, gates can sometimes give parents a lot of anxiety too. And so there's a lot of things that we'd go through to see like, why they still are getting up and what's right for that family. Because you have to be in a mindset too that, okay, this may work for your friend or your family, but this is not my parenting style. This is not, it doesn't sit right with me. So we always take into consideration what is the parenting style. If you're attachment style parenting, if someone who's more authoritative, whatever it may be, we need to find a plan that you feel comfortable with and that you're be consistent with. Because if you're not consistent, forget it. They're going to find those loopholes and they're just going to spin it to their way, right? So
I honestly feel like, especially 2, 3, 4 year olds, like they
yes.
know
Oh
their
yeah.
weak points. Like they're like, oh, if I do this, I elicit this response. I'm just gonna do this
Yes.
over and over again.
They're brilliant. They are brilliant. Their job is to test boundaries and they do it perfectly. Perfectly, right?
They're
Every single
awesome at
time.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are like they're experts because it's almost like you like they're like, what can I get away with?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna try that. And
Yes.
that's gonna
Yeah.
work. And then
Right.
it's like the evidence for them is like it works all the time. I push
I
the button,
know.
I
And
win.
they'll try it on each parent too. They'll be like, okay, well, mommy, she'll do this, and then but if I do this with daddy, he'll do this.
Yeah.
Very brilliant little ones.
Oh,
Very, very
my husband actually said that. He was like, "She's playing us," and I'm like, "Yep, she
Yep.
is."
But you love them anyways, right? But it's just like
Like
they're so
even for
cute.
myself, when she would come to the bed in my bed at night, I'm like, "Oh, she's only gonna be a baby so long." And then in the
I
morning, I'm
know.
like, "Listen, I am so tired. I got kicked by
Yes.
this toddler 7 times last
Well,
night."
that's it. That's it, right?
I'm
It's
like,
not that they sleep peacefully. And I think a lot
"No."
of times too that parents are like, oh, well, they don't like their own bed or they don't like their crib. It's not that at all. They just want to sleep with you. It's not their bed. It's they want to sleep with
Exactly.
you. That's the issue, right? There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with their bed. There's nothing wrong with their crib. It's just that they want to have that comfort.
I'm Shira Bergbauer, and you're listening to an excerpt from the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. You can listen to the whole episode wherever you get your podcasts, and look out for new episodes out every Monday. You're doing a great job, Mama. I'll see you next week. Bye now.